Hello everybody, welcome back, and today I'm chatting through another book from the Women's Prize 2023 shortlist. Longlist? Black Butterflies by Priscilla Morris. This is a very impressive debut. I admit at the end I had tears and sort of caught in my throat, which would have been a surprise to me because by about page 50 I wanted to put the book down. So let me explain to you how we turn things around and what we have. Black Butterflies is a book based around the first year of the siege of Sarajevo. Starting in spring 92, it has taken real life recollections of the beginning of the the Bosnian-Serbian conflict, the siege of Sarajevo in particular, and has used this to bring to life what it is for a community to slip into war. That is what Priscilla is looking at. That war does not start with gas chambers. Fascism does not start with gas chambers. It starts as neighbours turn on each other. This is unexpected. So it was cool. When I first picked it up, I thought Black Butterflies was actually a book about race or a book about a black community. Actually, Black Butterflies is a reference to what happens when you might have seen really large fires or when significant size objects have been set alight. It produces a great amount of ash, but that ash doesn't fall immediately to the ground. The ash floats away. You can see it rising up from the fire. Black butterflies. And this is what a lot of the Sarajevo residents referred to in the air as they would wake to destruction of the buildings and their city around them by seeing all these black ash butterflies in the sky. So a beautiful and evocative title. Priscilla is a writer who has Yugoslav heritage, and so she's obviously done a great deal of research, possibly within her family and in the community and elsewhere, in order to bring together a very simple story that focuses around one resident, a middle-aged woman, Zora, who is an artist and teacher in Sarajevo, who gets caught up in the beginning of the conflict. Despite the fact that some of her family members are able to get out of the country at the beginning of the conflict, she is caught up alone in Sarajevo. And it follows the 12 months as we see Zora's life cave in on itself, her relationship with her community and her neighbours evolve and change, and how she is psychologically, emotionally, as well as physically impacted by the war. What is amazing about this book is that it is not dramatic. It is not overstated. The tragedies aren't writ large for emotional angst, wrangling of emotions and huge, great big scenes of loss and murder. This is a very subtle book. And there's this wonderful comment on the book, on the back, by Amanita Fauna. And she writes, who's the author of The Hired Man, by the way, and she writes, Black Butterflies brilliantly evokes a world slipping day by day under the opaque waters of war. And that is what this book is. It is not meant to shock and awe you. It is simply how a community finds itself slipping into conflict. How one step in front of the other and 300 steps later, you find you're all at war. What is interesting is, like I said, by about page 50, I was like, we weren't really going anywhere. Zora wasn't a fully fledged character. Her husband hadn't yet fled. We had sort of two-dimensional neighbours that were peripheral, and I got the idea that she was the artist in Sarajevo and she taught, and I thought, I can't get beneath Zora. And that was interesting because actually when you stripped Zora of her family unit, which is what Priscilla does, she strips her of all the support structures that Zora had at the time. And then not only does she bring in war, but she leaves Zora alone to find her way through it. And that is where Zora comes alive. And that is where this book comes alive. And it is brilliantly done. And I also applaud Priscilla for using a middle-aged woman. There are younger people in here. You obviously have neighbours who have sons who want to go off and fight. You have younger mothers with young children and having to see the war and loss and suffering through their eyes. There could have been an easier choice of protagonist, and instead Priscilla has taken someone who from a demographic is usually overlooked. So she could have gone with a young man who went off to war, and that would have been an exciting, dramatic encounter of snipers and brothers and former friends and everything. Or it could have had someone who'd lost their daughter or their son. These would have been easy choices. Instead, Priscilla uses Zora as someone who would have been overlooked, and instead gives her the main stage and allows this woman with immense experience of life, whose behaviour has already been shaped, you know, when you don't really know your neighbours and you have a very set routine, and you don't have kids at school or anything, you just have your set routine, and you go to work, you go and do the food shop. It's very set routine and is completely shattered. A routine that is extremely well embedded has gone. And that shock is really palpable, and you allow, through Zora's eyes, to really feel that shock of something that was so straightforward and simple, this multicultural community ripped to shreds by malevolent forces that ultimately pull apart residents and pull apart a city. It is beautiful. It is a short book. It's 250 pages. There's some really interesting choices by Priscilla in what she brings to life here. For example, is not only do you get to know different people, different neighbours, etc., but your friendship behaviour patterns, your relationship patterns change. When you're put under intense pressure, this forced sense of community, where you strike up friendships change, where you strike up close, intimate relationships change, and how you feel about people who aren't with you. How does it feel? Brilliant. I adore Black Butterflies and I would recommend it. What's interesting and why I applaud the Women's Prize for this is by long listing this book, it made me keep going beyond page 50, because I just thought, well, the Women's Prize wouldn't have recommended this book unless they really felt it. Under any other circumstance, perhaps I would have put that book down, and I'm so glad that I kept going because it was richly rewarding. I would like to say one special thing about this book. I don't think you particularly need a trigger warning for this. Like I say, nothing is sensationalized. It is extremely delicate and moving. What is interesting is there's a part, or one of the subplots, is about white smugglers. So men and women who help smuggle people out of Sarajevo. And it's interesting how they are depicted in this book. Truthfully, how they are depicted at the time. This isn't a criticism of Priscilla. We live in a world where black smugglers or black people are edited very differently. Where white smugglers or white people have a certain heroic quality. Black smugglers or black people fleeing conflict are not. Just an interesting observation that probably has nothing to do with Priscilla, but obviously we're living in a climate at the moment where there is a lot written, especially in the UK, about people of colour and how they're being smuggled, trafficked, especially across the Mediterranean and around the routes into Europe, and how they are being depicted in our press. So this is a very sad reminder that conflict is ever present, and I'm really pleased that Priscilla's brought to life a really powerful piece of our recent history that hasn't got written about much, is certainly not a part of routine fiction source of novel, and I think it's been richly represented here in a way that is so understated it gives us its power, and it's beautiful. It really is beautiful. Black Butterflies by Priscilla Morris. I loved it.